Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, our guest today is State Senator Cam Ward. Also, the V-Team takes a look at the governor's State of the State address. And news organizations throughout the state are calling for Speaker Mike Hubbard to step down. At the State House, all this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good Sunday morning.
Good morning.
Morning. On Tuesday, Governor Robert Bentley gave his 5th State of the State address. We were there. Let's go to Jonathan Barbie, who interviewed several folks that evening. Jonathan?
Thanks, Bill. Governor Robert Bentley gave his 5th State of the State address on Tuesday evening. Among the topics of his agenda were taxes, education, and prison reform. We were there to hear comments from both Democrats and Republicans after the event.
I want every parent to know that at the end of my term, there will be a first-class pre-K classroom available for their child. As a physician, I know the healthcare needs in Alabama, and we intend to create solutions that are specific to the needs of Alabama's people. Local and state judges, district attorneys, victims' rights groups, and many others have collaborated as part of the Prison Reform Task Force to develop a new plan to reform our prison system. The budget I will send you will contain 8 separate tax increase proposals, which are fair and are necessary for a total of $541 million in estimated increased revenue. It is unfair for certain groups to be taxed for goods and services while others are not taxed for those same goods and services. If Alabama families have to pay their fair share of taxes, so should large national and international corporations.
Well, I'm excited to see the governor finally embracing some Democratic policies. I mean, like the policies that he's talking about. We've been pushing for years in regards to something that we know he'll be working with, tobacco taxes. That's something that the Democrats have pushed. Closing corporate loopholes. That's something we have been pushing.
Some of his proposals are things that Democrats have been proposing for a long time. The closing loopholes bill is one I've sponsored probably for 8 years, and it's one that definitely needs to be passed.
Well, we commend the governor for taking a stance and identifying that there is a problem. We're disappointed in the stance that he didn't discuss the lottery. The state of Alabama wants to vote on a lottery. There's money right there. It's a voluntary tax that if you don't want to participate, you don't have to pay it. So if we're trying to raise revenue, there's $300 million sitting on the table.
Well, I mean, the prison reform is everybody is on board. Education, we want to continue to do what we can to make a better education in the state. I'm a big proponent of school choice and see legislation to that effect. The revenue measures are tough. I mean, as Republicans and conservatives, we tend to like smaller government and saving money.
Although Republicans were shying away from Governor Bentley's tax agenda, they did say they are willing to work with him to help close the gap on the $700 million deficit. Bill, back to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Susan, there's a lot of people that say the governor's tax package will never fly. It's dead on arrival. What do you think?
I think that's a terrible idea because it really has some things in there. This is not really going to affect taxpayers like people think it is. This is a lot of cutting out corporate tax credits for out-of-state corporations. giving tax credits to insurance companies and stuff like that no longer need them. It's pretty, I mean, the cigarette tax affects the average person, but other than that, it's mainly geared at corporations.
What did you think of the speech, Claire, overall?
Well, I mean, I thought he did a good job as far as his delivery. Being the first week of the session, there's a lot of freshmen and there are a lot of people up there saying, I'm not going to vote for a single tax increase, and I understand some of their thought process. But as you've mentioned, a lot of loopholes and incentives to corporations, those are really just kind of rolling back benefits, really. Other than the automobile tax stuff
Right.
and then the cigarette tax, I don't think those will ever get much. I don't think they'll get much headway. Those probably won't go anywhere.
Can we take this Grover Norquist argument that cigarette tax shouldn't be taxed? Can we take that argument?
No, I don't accept that argument. I've long advocated for several years now for a cigarette tax increase for multiple reasons. But even that aside, to suggest that we can cut our way out of this is nonsense. They've had 3 years where we've been running budget deficits and borrowing to break even, borrowing from the Alabama Trust Fund to break even. If we could cut our way out of this, we would have done it each of the last 3 years, and we would not be in the hole. The reason we're in the hole is because the borrowing has run dry. We're out of money to borrow, and now we must either raise taxes or find another source of borrowing. There are two ways when you're spending money. You can either borrow to break even, or you can tax to break even. One is kicking the can down the road so that later they'll have to tax your children and grandchildren. One of them is taxing the people who are using the government services now.
And thankfully, they haven't made all these cuts, or the deficit would be much greater than it is.
Well, I think that's actually, and there's a lot of truth to everything you're saying, but I also think that the chairman of the general fund, and they're looking at some consolidations of several different agencies that maybe, as far as some ag stuff, and I think over at Commerce and ADO and ADECA, some of that sort of thing, they should be able to, lose probably $1 million or so right there just in administrative costs, I would think.
Well, the problem is these are systemic problems to Alabama. We've had governor after governor, legislature after legislature, and we got the same problem. At least Bentley's trying to do something rather than saying, oh, there's nothing wrong here, it's all good. At least he's being honest. We've got a problem, we have to address it.
I agree. It's been 20 plus years.
Yes.
The same night that the governor was giving his State of the State address, the Supreme Court of Alabama stepped all over that news cycle like Bigfoot. Barron, gay marriage is back in the headlines in Alabama.
It's back in the headlines, but to me the bigger story is the court sticking their finger in the governor's eye and taking his big night. They usually release opinions on Friday.
Right.
That's correct.
They could have done it last Friday. They could have done it this coming Friday. Instead, they released it on a Tuesday night, 30 minutes before the governor's State of the State speech. This is his big night. This is when he gets all the headlines. I think they're upset that he hadn't been a bigger backer of the opposition to gay marriage to this point, and I think they made that point loudly and clearly.
And the viewers should know that the Supreme Court of Alabama sits on the front row during the State of the State, so they were sitting right in front of him, as almost defiant, I believe.
Well, and you, as a valid point you made, I mean, traditionally, and as a lawyer, and from working in offices, they always release this information on Friday afternoons. Usually you can count it by clockwork about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, it was shocking because, before we could walk out the door of the State of the State, Bigfoot had landed, and it was like gay marriage. That was the tweets going out everywhere. Didn't Chief Justice Moore, he recused himself.
He
Is that
did
correct,
recuse
Susan?
himself because he's been so vocal. And, he's looking at the pending JIC complaint. So he did step aside and recuse himself.
You think that's going anywhere, Barron?
No.
I don't think so either. Well, whether you believe in traditional marriage or allowing this to go forward, one of the things that bothers me in that opinion, it's long and it's really lengthy, is they kind of make the case that, unless you're procreating, you may not have a right to have a marriage. It's some wild stuff
It's
in
not
there.
going to be up to the Alabama Supreme Court anyway. It's going to be up to the United States Supreme Court in June. That's
right.
when this issue will be decided. Judge Grenade, personal agenda, whatever it was she was after, she issued her ruling in advance of the Supreme Court's ruling, which caused the Supreme Court of Alabama to have to do something. They have to run for re-election in a couple of years. And they can't look like they're sitting on the sidelines with their hands in their pockets, not doing something.
Well, we got about 2 minutes. We've got this topic I want to spend the rest of the show on, but I want to introduce it here. And Barron, you've done a lot of work on this. A little over a week ago, a firestorm hit the state when the state's prosecution against Mike Hubbard released a more defined statement in which 45 pages of document and 85 pages of evidence made people for the first time believe Mike Hubbard might be a crook. Right, Barron?
Well, I'm telling you, it's hard to read those emails and come to any other conclusion. It really is.
Be careful what you ask for. That's what I would tell his lawyers.
Well, Mark White asked for this, Claire, and they got it. I mean, you've looked through these documents. They're damning, aren't they?
They're awfully damning. In fact, I ran across a piece of information yesterday where in a proposal to IMG, when he was going to be a consultant for them, it says specifically in there, please do not contract to me. Please contract to Auburn Network. That way I don't have to report it on my ethics filings. I mean
in black and white, this man is saying...
Okay, I hadn't said it, but every bit of what he has done is egregious. I mean, there's just no way of looking at this. I mean, I don't know how he gets past this PR battle. What do you think, Barron?
I don't think he'll get past the PR battle. Certainly, after this, it doesn't look like he'll get past the legal battle either. The big question is he going to retain his power in any semblance of what he already has?
Well, so far, we've had the silence of the lambs over in the State House. Nobody said anything. The governor, Terry Latham, with the Republican Party, I mean, everybody has just been silent. We have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with State Senator Cam Ward.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Our guest today is State Senator Cam Ward. Welcome, Senator.
Bill, thanks for having me on again.
We are happy to have you. You were one of our first guests almost 2 years ago. We're always pleased to have you. You have, over several years, worked to find a conservative, common sense approach to reforming our broken prison system. I know you've come a long way. Can you give our viewers some idea of where we are and where you hope to take us?
Well, under the plan we presented yesterday to the Prison Task Force, which was approved overwhelmingly by stakeholders from both the right side of the political spectrum as well as the left side, what we came up with is an approach that over the next 5 years, taking our prison system from 192% capacity, taking it all the way down to under 140%. We would lead the nation in that kind of recovery effort as far as reforming our system. Now, that being said, we will not release a single inmate early. And I think that speaks a lot toward, as you mentioned, a conservative plan to getting there. We didn't invent this package. It came from the best practices of other states, North Carolina, Texas, Mississippi, and Georgia. They've done this already. We're following their best practices, and I think we have a really good opportunity to make some real reforms in Alabama.
Do you think that your fellow conservatives in the Senate and the House have seen the light on knowing you can be tough on crime, but also smart on crime, I think, as you say?
Yeah, and I think if you look to other states and see what they've done, you realize, yes, you can do both. If you look at Texas, no one's going to ever say Texas, as red as they are, is a soft on crime state. The same for Mississippi and Georgia and North Carolina. However, what they did was they saved taxpayer dollars in the long run. They saved a lot of money. Crime went down. And they now have vacant prison facilities they can use for something else because they were smart about how they did it. I think a lot of fellow conservatives realize that. They understand it. And they realize, too, we've got to do something or we're going to have a federal takeover, which would be disastrous for our budgets.
You know, I was speaking with someone the other day, and I heard someone make the comment that said, well, good, let the federal government come in and take it over. They'll have to pay for it. That's not the way it works, is it?
It's not how it works here. And there's two arguments against that. First of all, everyone who I know ran for the legislature this last time, they vowed they were going to be a 10th Amendment candidate, that we're going to stand up and we're going to dare defend our rights as a 10th Amendment state. If we're going to truly be a 10th Amendment state and defend states' rights, then we as a state should fix our own problems and not rely on a federal court to do it for us. Second, no. If a federal court takes over your system, what happens is, as California showed, they will take over your system, they will force you to come up with the revenue, and they will force you to have a mass release of inmates, which is bad for public safety and a budget bankrupt.
What do you say to conservatives, and maybe it's the far right side of the field, but they say, well, they've committed crimes, let's just chain them to a bunk and feed them bread and water?
Well, I have the same ideology that Grover Norquist, Newt Gingrich, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, all leading Republicans in our country have said. They said everyone should be punished for a crime they commit. There's no question about that. However, should we treat the mass murderer the same way we treat the person who stole a lawnmower out of a shed? No. Should they both be punished? Yes. We should punish everyone, but let's make it concurrent with what the crime was. And in the end, do you really want because 98% of everybody gets out of prison early. Do we really want someone being released who's a violent criminal? Or would you rather have this person who stole the lawnmower somehow eventually one day have supervision while they're out on parole? I think that's what you want. It's smarter and it's safer.
One of the things that your plan has in it is more supervised, more supervision over those folks that are once released from prison. Isn't that part of it?
Well, you know, I think as voters and taxpayers in Alabama, I want to make sure, again, 98% of everybody in the country who goes to prison eventually get out. I want to make sure when they do get out, they have somebody watching over them to make sure, one, they pay their restitution to the victims. Two, that they're actually complying with the terms of their parole. I think every taxpayer in this state should want that. So, yes, that's a big part of our plan.
We've seen Chief Justice Roy Moore said that our prison, the way we're running them now, is basically inhumane. I mean, that's a very large conservative voice. Other folks chiming in on that?
I believe so, yes. And I want to commend Senator Marsh in the Senate. He's spoken out on it, done an editorial as well. I think there are other folks realizing if we don't do something now, then a federal intervention would be absolutely disastrous. It would cost us so much money and cause us so many problems that I don't believe financially we could survive it.
Other than prisons, I know you're basically on every committee there is except for a few, and you're deeply involved in your public service. Other than the prison situation, what else are you looking at for this session?
Another big bill I had that we got worked out but ran out of time the last session is the Open Meetings Act. Several court cases have struck down and basically gutted our current open meetings law. My bill seeks to restore and strengthen the transparency of government, not just at the state level, but county and local level as well. And I believe we can pass that bill early this session.
As being a reporter, one of the things that we are very concerned about is the Open Meetings Act, the right to certain government documents. I mean, this is really a part of our national heritage that the press and the government have to work at odds and sometimes with to get the news out to the folks.
Government always works best in the sunshine.
Yeah.
It just does, and that's proven throughout the history of our country. To have more access, the public should have more access, not less. In this day of internet and instant messaging, Google, YouTube, we should have the ability to have more access to public discussions, public debates. It helps us as a citizenry to have that access to our public officials and what they're talking about.
You are one that does communicate by electronic devices.
Some would say too much, but yes.
Too much. Well, you know, I know we get all your tweets and Facebooking and all that. And I think the senators who do that, or the lawmakers who do that, they seem to be more accessible. Do you find your constituents respond well to that?
I think oftentimes as elected officials, we don't respect the voters enough. The voters are a lot smarter than a lot of politicians give them credit for. They understand the issues. They just want you to be honest and open with them. The more open you are, more accessible you are, the more you tell them when you agree with them and disagree with them. Voters appreciate that. They respect that.
We've got about 30 seconds. Anything else on your mind that you want to share today?
I think there's no question in our mind. The general fund budget is going to be a big challenge for everybody this session. We've got a couple, of course, the issue of prisons, which ties into that. However, I do feel like this is the first year of the quadrennium. This is the opportunity for us to have more bold reforms we've probably had in the last 4 years being in the state Senate.
Well, I appreciate you coming to visit with us today to share your heart and your thoughts with our viewers. And we do appreciate your service to the people of Alabama. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me again, Bill.
Our guest today has been State Senator Cam Ward. You're watching The V. We'll be right back with more news and analysis.
The V is sponsored by MediaWorks Communications, quality video production and marketing services.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Sentra with Bose Audio and Nissan Connect technology. Spread your joy. Nissan. Innovation that excites.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Welcome, Jack Campbell.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Jackson.
Pleasure
Glad
to be
have
here,
you on the
Clary,
set.
Barron.
You know, we were talking about those emails that were released by the state's prosecution of Mike Hubbard. They were damning. Looking through some of the business arrangements he had, they are so tied to legislation, loans, economic development deals. This one group, Edgenuity, which is an education group, he was getting $7,500 a month, Barron. I mean, how do you work for an education group like that and then want to pass lobbying bills for charter schools?
Well, let's back up first and understand why we even are looking at these emails in the first place. His lawyer knew he was a dirtbag. You know when your client's a dirtbag. I've represented criminal defendants. You know which ones are dirtbags and which ones aren't. When you have a dirtbag on your hands, the last thing you want to do is tempt the prosecution to let the world know your client's a dirtbag. You want to keep that behind the scenes as long as possible. So the impossibly foolish motion for more definite statement, one wonders why on earth that was even filed. But it was, and we get these emails. This Edgenuity paying him $7,500 a month, this is a charter school type of corporation. This is where they make their money. You want to know why Alabama right now is racing to pass charter school legislation as quickly as possible and not even worrying about the fact that we're $700 million in the hole? This is what pay to play looks like. I'm not saying it is, but if it was, this is what it would look like.
Well, I will say, the only thing they've done is they've made sure it's generated in the Senate first and not the House of Representatives, but it was their first order of business. They had a committee meeting, hearing, substitute, all. It'll probably be voted out this following week on the floor in the Senate and
Jack,
then down to the House.
If it smells this bad, it can't be good, right?
No, and why do his fellow members not recognize this? Why do people in the Senate, I think it went out of committee 4-3.
Yeah,
what were those 4 people thinking? I mean, he's already gotten in hot water once, and it cost Greg Wren his job dealing with APCI or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And their lobbyist, who's also the lobbyist for Edgenuity, that is just in your face. I'm sorry.
Well, when did the speaker, how can these legislators be lobbyists and vote on things? There is a conflict of interest here.
Well, Hugh Grant, not Hugh Evans, Hugh Evans. Hugh Evans. Hugh Grant's the actor, right?
Yeah.
Hugh Grant Evans, I think that's his name. Hugh Evans told him, you cannot use the mantle of your office or anything else that's related to the speaker. Listen, when he went to Robert Abrams, all right, CV Holdings, a man who was paying him $10,000 a month, Josh Blades helped this guy get a patent through.
Now that's 2 contracts you're talking about, $7,500 a month and $10,000 a month.
Right.
$17,500 a month being paid to the Alabama Speaker of the House while he sits in the Speaker's chair and holds the gavel is just crooked. I'm sorry.
And directing legislation.
I don't give a damn what the Ethics Commission says. They're a bunch of weaklings and always have been.
Well, particularly Jim Sumner was not going to do anything
I don't know anything
to hurt
about Tom Albritton, but
Well, you're not even including the pharmacists and the Medicaid contract. You're not including that.
The contract with
Aberson and Ingenuity.
Baron, how much did he make in contracts in 2012?
It was several $100,000.
Well, Southeastern Alabama Gas District paid him almost $300,000.
Isn't his wife's cousin on that board or something?
Yeah, he runs it. He's the president.
Yeah, he's president.
There you have it.
But the thing is, getting back to this, look at this legislation that gets passed. Now, you have lobbyists or principals of lobbyists also giving him $600,000 in investments, Jack.
And one of them was Robert Abrams, the guy that owns CV Holdings, to whom how much? $78 million in RSA money went to? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Mysteriously, just shortly after somebody came on board.
It's like a mullet market. People say, does it smell? You damn right it smells.
Well, let's back everything up and let's peel the curtain back, because you referenced the Hugh Evans letter.
Yeah.
That Hugh Evans letter at the bottom, if you read it carefully, it said, Mike, contract looks okay to me as it is, subject to these conditions. This is no different than the other contracts that so many of the other legislators have. This is a scandal brewing in the state of Alabama that reaches far beyond the Speaker of the House. You want to know why no one's moved to remove the Speaker of the House? They're all on the take, it seems like.
Well, I wouldn't take the brush and say they're all on the take.
Enough of them
There are enough of them that are. There's some House members and there are some senators, and that's why they don't have the guts to do
We should
that.
know every single person that's paying a legislator. I'm sorry. If you work for the federal government, if you're in the federal House of Representatives, we should know every single person that pays our legislators.
Absolutely.
We got about a minute left. When session started, Mike Hubbard sat there as big as day with a gavel in his hand, looking confident that he was king of the world.
Well, now I heard there was a lot of tenseness on the floor. There was a lot. It was not as congenial as you would think.
Well, he still had the gavel in his hand. He looked pretty confident when I saw him.
Well, just like his State of the State, you had Kay Ivey up there like a deer in the headlights. You had Del Marsh, the enabler, and you had the convict, all behind the governor.
It was bad optics.
Quite a show.
It was bad optics all the way around. Well, I thought Governor Bentley did a great job, despite the optics of an enabler, whatever, and a guy that's probably going to go to jail. Well, listen, we're going to have to let it go right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch new stories every day on ALReporter.com and catch us every week on your ABC affiliate throughout the state. Thank you for watching.